Good morning.
Last week, when you spoke to Mr. Martinez, you were asked several questions about taking personal responsibility and how you blamed everyone else. Do you remember that line of questioning at various points last week?
Yes.
In that regard, let me ask you a couple questions. Were you forced to testify?
No.
When you chose to testify, did you do so with the idea that the lies you told would be called into question?
Yes.
And you chose to testify anyway?
Objection, relevance.
Approach.
Overruled. You may continue.
Now, Ms. Arias, getting back to my question, knowing that you knew that you were going to be questioned about the lies you told, or you assumed you'd be questioned about the lies you had told throughout this process when you chose to testify, right?
Yes.
And you chose to do it anyway. You chose to testify anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay. And in terms of admitting certain things against this claim that you didn't take any personal responsibility, I recall days ago, one of the first questions I asked you was whether or not you killed Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And you recall your answer to that question?
Yes.
Yes. And your answer was that you did, in fact, kill Travis Alexander on June 4th, 2008. Do you recall that, telling us that?
Yes.
Objection. Leading also misstates what she said. She killed him, but then she added the but portion.
Sustained.
You also told us why you were forced to do that, didn't you?
Yes.
And remind us, why was that?
Well, he was trying to kill me, so I was defending myself.
Did you go to Mr. Alexander's home on June 4th with the intent on killing him?
No, I didn't.
Did at any point in time during that day, June 4th, 2008, did you make a conscious decision that I want to kill Travis Alexander?
No, that was never a thought.
Okay. Ms. Arias, when you began talking to counsel for the state, you were shown a couple exhibits, and I want to cover those with you. Actually, let me first show you, if I could refresh your memory as to when these photographs occurred, showing you exhibits 452 and 453.
Yes.
And do you remember the date that that photograph took place?
May 15th, 2008?
I'm sorry, just say May 15th?
Yes, 15th.
Okay. showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 452. If I recall correctly, that's you and your sister Angela, right?
Yes.
All right. And that is your hand around her, right?
That's right.
Okay. And in Exhibit 453, got a second there. That's your hand again, right?
Yes.
Now, perhaps before we move on past this photograph, you would concede that there's no visible bend in your finger, at least in terms of any injury, correct?
Correct. Well, it's sort of bent.
Right. Well, going back to 452, it appears, I know Angela is wearing a hat, but it appears that she's at least a few inches shorter than you. Is that fair to say?
Yes, that's her height.
Okay. How tall are you, Miss Arias?
I think I'm 5'5.5" or 5'6", somewhere around there.
I'm a little taller than that, so I'm going to ask Miss Wilmot to come forward. Jodi, if you could step down, please, in front of the jury.
Judge, for purposes of this, we need to have Ms. Wilmot's height in whatever it is that she's wearing. Other than that, I would object on the grounds of relevance.
The objections overruled.
And we'll just have Miss Wilmot, for the record, state her height.
I would say I'm 5'3", 5'4" with heels on. I can't be certain. I don't know how high my heels are.
If you could, Jodi and Miss Wilmot, could we see you, for lack of a better term, recreate the pose we see in Exhibit 452? And if you could turn. Okay, thank you. Now, prior to, well, we talked a lot about injuries you sustained to your hands. And when you have sustained those injuries, prior to June 4th, immediately prior, I should ask, did you suffer any injuries to either one of your hands?
Yes.
Could you tell us how those injuries occurred?
I believe it was my index finger, and I was putting away big margarita glasses at work.
Objection to microphone date.
Sustained.
When were you putting away these margarita glasses?
I believe, if I remember correctly, it was June 1st. That's what the date stamp said on the photo.
Okay. And what happened to your hand and where were you working?
Casa Ramos.
Okay. And how did you injure yourself putting away margarita glasses at Casa Ramos?
I was just moving too fast and I was a little bit clumsy, not intentionally, but there's a metal shelf beneath the bar, and that's where they all sit and cool off because when they come out of the dishwasher, they're really hot. So they have to cool off before we can put margaritas in them or they'll crack. So I was rotating the cool ones from the back out and putting the hot ones in the back. And as I was reaching in with my hand, I hit some of the metal and it peeled back some of the skin, and it was just a wound.
Did you photograph those injuries?
Yes,
And how did you do that?
just with my phone.
Okay. Would that be the Helio phone we'd been discussing earlier?
Yes.
If I may approach, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibits 506 and 507, respectively. Could you take a look at both those exhibits and see if you recognize those as the photographs you took?
Yes. I guess the date would have been the 31st of May instead.
Okay. I'm going to move to admit Exhibits 506 and 507.
Objection relevance. These show injuries to the right hand.
Will we approach?
May approach. Objection overruled. Exhibits 506 and 507 are admitted.
Now, Jodi, while those are being marked into evidence, could you describe for us why you chose to take these photographs?
Yes, after my boss gave me a big Band-Aid to cover it because it kind of covered a larger surface area. And so I went home, took a shower, and then after that I peeled it back just to check on it, and it was just kind of gnarly, so it was like a trophy picture, kind of. I was going to send it to some friends, say, look what I did at work. I mean, it sounds strange saying it post June 4th, but before that it didn't seem like a big deal. I sent it to a few friends to say, look what happened, this is crazy, kind of thing.
Okay. Showing you what's been marked as Exhibit 506. That's one of the cuts you sustained to your hand?
Yeah, the fold of the skin is back over the injury.
Okay. And can you tell from this exhibit, is this your right or left hand?
That would be my right hand.
Okay. And Exhibit 507, is that a photograph of a different injury or the same injury?
The same one, different angle.
Okay. And we're talking about your right index finger as well, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, Ms. Arias, you had told us that these injuries occurred on the 31st of May. Is that
It would have been the
accurate?
31st or the 1st. I'm not sure if the timestamp on that is also Greenwich time or if it's Pacific Standard Time.
Okay. But given that you were serving margaritas, would it be safe to assume you weren't working the breakfast shift?
That's correct.
Okay. So it would have either been the evening of the 31st or the evening of the 1st when these injuries occurred. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And these injuries we just saw in exhibits 506 and 507, had they healed by the time you went to Utah on June 5th or 6th?
I think it had healed mostly.
Do you recall if you still had bandages on your hand?
I don't actually recall. I know I eventually got bandages on my hand, but I don't remember if I still had one from the index finger or not, or if, I don't remember.
Okay. Now, before we get too far off the subject of hand injuries in Utah, you said that you weren't sure if you had bandages on those, these injuries on your right hand. Do you recall if you had any other injuries to your hand
In Utah?
in Utah?
I did. I had Band-Aids on my right hand, and I don't think it was the index finger. I think they were other fingers. I don't remember. But I know I had Band-Aids on my right hand.
Now, the Band-Aids on your right hand, you said it may not have been your index finger. Was were these injuries caused by the same incident at Casa Ramos, or were they caused by something else?
Something else.
Okay, and what was that?
It was broken glass. I dropped one of Travis's glasses when I was downstairs when I arrived the morning of June 4th. We were getting water from, he has a cold water dispenser on his fridge. So I was getting water and I dropped one, and I was cleaning up the glass because I thought, I clean up glass at work and it's not something I'm uncomfortable with, so I guess I was being too casual and careless, and I cut my fingers.
And you have stated to us that those injuries were on your right hand.
That's correct.
How are you so confident of that?
That's what I remember pretty clearly.
Okay. As it relates to your left hand, do you recall having injuries on your left hand when you were in Utah?
I don't recall one way or another. I definitely don't remember an injury. I'm not saying there wasn't, but I don't remember one.
Would it be fair to say that whatever injuries you had on your hand when you arrived in Utah weren't your primary focus?
Infection meeting.
That would be fair to say.
Now, we heard about some of the injuries to your hand. We heard about the struggle or fight you had with Mr. Alexander on June 4th. Did you have any other injuries visible when you went to Utah?
As far as visible, not that I'm aware of. I had other injuries, but I think they were covered with clothing.
Are you telling us then that you had to make effort to make sure these injuries were covered?
No, I think it was just like I had injuries around on my feet and my ankles, and I think just because I was wearing socks and shoes, they weren't visible.
Okay. Now this injury again, maybe you could be so kind as to hold up and show us your broken finger again as you did on direct.
Oh,
Your finger?
regular
No, this
or-
way. This way, so it's visible.
Like this?
Okay. When did that injury occur?
January 22nd, 2008.
Okay. Now you were asked, and that is the injury you incurred when you testified to having received when Mr. Alexander was kicking you in the ribs and he ended up kicking your hand, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You were asked about any medical attention that you might have sought for that. And you said something to the effect of you didn't seek any professional medical attention. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Did you receive anything that could be considered quote-unquote medical attention? Did you bandage it? Could you just kind of explain that to us?
Yes, we didn't bandage it because there was no broken skin, but after Travis calmed down and apologized, he made a splint for it, and I just thought that was really nice because he got really angry and then was very ashamed.
Objection beyond the scope of the question, what medical treatment you
Sustained.
How did you feel about Travis making this? You said Travis made this splint for you. How did you feel about him making that?
Objection beyond the scope. You're asked your feelings by the state.
Approach, please. Continue.
And Ms. Arias, were telling us Mr. Alexander broke your finger, that you didn't receive any professional medical treatment for it, but that Mr. Alexander made a splint for you. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And how did you feel about him making that for you?
It sounds kind of weird, but it was kind of endearing because he was very tender with it. He was being very careful, and he got a bag of ice and crushed it, and we put ice on it, and so he just did what he could to right what he had wronged, I guess you could say. So that meant a lot.
And you found that was enough for you to perceive it as endearing, is that right?
Yes, the moment was endearing. It seemed very tender. He was very sincere, and I mean, when I got home, I took it off and cried, and he made another one for me later, but at the moment when he made it, he was just very gentle with it.
During the time you spent answering Mr. Martinez's questions, you're talking about how great it was for him to make this splint for you. We also saw some journal entries and text messages and things that talked about in which you praised Travis. Do you remember seeing those throughout the
Yes.
course of the... Okay. I want to ask you about a few of those, Ms. Arias. were talking about some of the things you had told us during cross-examination, some of the things you've been shown about how great a guy you thought Travis was. I want to show you what's been marked as Exhibit 484. Can you see that?
Yes.
You said, Travis, I thank you for being such an amazing friend. Was he an amazing friend to you?
Yes, at times he was very amazing.
You say at times. You know, we heard about the Cinnabon card that he left on your car when you came home from a trip.
Yes.
Were there, before maybe we go beyond that, what made him such an amazing friend to you?
It's more about how he made me feel. He would, and things he would say. He believed in me. He saw my potential, or saw potential in me, and he just made me feel like I could go, I don't know, he made me feel really good, like I could realize that potential and beyond. And I feel like he saw past whatever exterior was there and saw inside, and he made me feel like I was a beautiful person inside.
Okay, you said a couple things there. You said he made you feel as if you could realize your potential. Is that something that anyone else, is that feeling something that anyone else had given you in your life?
Occasionally, Daryl, and occasionally Matt, and I don't really remember with Bobby, but I mean, I think there was a few art teachers that really believed in me. I don't know.
But was there something different, be it the frequency or the type of affirmation about your potential that Mr. Alexander was giving you that was different than the affirmations you might have been getting from other people in your history?
I would say it was different. It was a lot more intense, more frequent. It's kind of like I was swept off my feet. He came at me really strong, but in a positive way, and it wasn't like what I had experienced before. It was nothing like what I experienced before, but it was similar in that it was positive, but it was just like amplified. That would be a good description.
Okay. You said you tell him that you call him a rock, a light, and an inspiration. Was that, when you said that on April 18th, 2008, was that sincere, your sincere feeling?
Yes.
What did you mean by inspiration? How did he inspire you?
He was a motivational speaker, and he would give talks sometimes at prepaid legal events, and he wouldn't just inspire me, he would inspire the whole crowd, so it created a sort of synergy or an energy in the room that just makes you feel like you can walk out of the room and conquer the world. He had a gift for that.
And that inspiration you talk about him providing in motivational speaking at prepaid legal seminars, did he provide that to you on a personal basis?
Yes, he counseled me many times on a lot of subjects.
Okay. You talk about how you appreciate the ways he's gone out of the way for you. What do you mean by that?
Do you want examples, you mean?
Yeah, if you could give us an example.
Well, Well, when he got me to move to Arizona, he paid for the rental. So I put all of my things from I had from Big Sur, and then I went to Palm Desert to get more things. And he paid for the rental to get out there, and I paid him back, but he gave me the money for it. And then he offered to have me store all of my things, my extra things that I didn't have room for at the house I was renting. He offered to let me store them at his house. Like my paintings, he cleared a space in his office closet just for them so that they wouldn't be exposed to the elements. Everything else went in the garage. My house plants, I didn't have room for them where I was, so he made space on his kitchen counter to keep them there. And they stayed there for the whole time I lived in Mesa. Other times when we were maybe at a prepaid legal event locally, he would pick up the tab if it was just dinner or something. Just little nice gestures that he would do. There was the Cinnabon thing that he went out of his way just to go get that just for me because he knew I wouldn't be able to get it when I flew back into Sky Harbor. I mean, there are tons of little things like that that he would do constantly.
Okay. Now, drawing your attention back to April 18th and that time period of 2008, one of the things you were asked about by Mr. Martinez is your feelings towards Mr. Alexander. So, in that regard, drawing your attention to this time period, did you love Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Now, when you were asked about that last week, you kind of were saying that you loved him, but it was different than it had been in the past. And you weren't allowed to explain that. So if you could kind of explain that difference, how you felt about him previously as to how you felt about him, say, using April 18th, 2008 as a guidepost.
Objection to the characterization, not allowed to explain it.
Sustained. Rephrase your question.
You explained to us the difference between how you felt about Mr. Alexander when you were dating him and you were involved in a relationship as opposed to April 18th, 2008?
Yes. When we first, I felt like I began to love him early on, but not in love. Like, I love all people. So he got that advancement automatically. But then as I got to know him, my love for him grew. And I wasn't sure where we were going because for about 5 months after meeting, we sort of just meandered without being in any kind of official relationship. But soon I began to fall in love with him. And that was during the time we were dating. And I felt pretty intense as far as being in love with him. And so when I discovered the things he was doing outside of our relationship, obviously that hurt and we broke up. But I still loved him. The love didn't go away just because the trust did. So we were sort of making an effort to maybe get back together, not testing the water. And then I kind of realized that maybe he wasn't going to change. And then when the morning of Havasu Pie, when he sweared at me, I just thought, I didn't want to continue with somebody like that could speak to, I didn't want to have children with somebody that could speak to their mother that way. I kind of looked at it that way. So I still loved him, but I began to pull back from the idea of a future with him. And so we remained in a limbo state for a while, and then it became apparent around Christmas time of 2007 is when I flew back home and realized I want to be here. I don't want to be in Arizona anymore. So...
let me ask you this, and maybe this would be an oversimplification, but forgive me if I do so. Would this early on period be more of a romantic love in the time, April 18, 2008? Would that be more of a platonic love, for lack of a better way of saying it?
It's complicated because by that time I felt more in an unconditional love where in terms that I just wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have a future that was happy. I wanted to have my own future, but I wanted us to be able to remain on good terms. And at the same time, we kept confusing our boundaries because we were still sleeping together and doing that. So that kind of kept my heart more involved than maybe it should have been.
Okay. So on April 18th, 2008, then, what you're telling us is you had an unconditional love for him.
That's how I would characterize it.
Okay. Exhibit 485, if I'm correct, was the note you made at his memorial, correct?
Yes.
Just, you can't see it all here, let me bring it up for you. That was your note to him, correct?
Correct.
And you had, through email or what have you at least, provided that photo of him to someone who was organizing that service. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. Before we get into the content of this, would it be safe to assume you weren't the only person at this memorial service?
Yes.
Matter of fact, you told us you talked to several people at that memorial service, correct?
Yes, I knew a lot of people there.
You weren't the only person, to your understanding, that thought Travis was a great guy, were you?
No, I was not.
As to what you wrote, and do you remember when his memorial service was?
I believe it was on a Sunday or maybe a Monday. So it would have been the 15th or 16th of June.
Okay. So on the 15th or 16th of June, you write that, Travis, you're beautiful on the inside and out. Did you mean that?
Yes.
And you also say you always told me that. Did Travis tell you that you were beautiful on the inside and out as well? Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, he said I was more beautiful on the inside.
And that made you feel good about yourself?
Yes.
You tell him that you never stopped believing in him. And I know that you always believed in me. When you say you've never stopped believing in Travis, what were you referring to?
His potential and his ability to realize what he wanted to do with his life. And I also believed that he could get better and fix the parts of him that he considered broken or that needed work. Like, we all have those parts, and he was constantly striving to work on himself.
You say, thank you for sharing so much. And is it fair to me to assume that you're talking about more than storage space for your pictures?
Yes.
What do you mean by that?
I just mean the things that he imparted to me. He shared a lot spiritually with me, and his wisdom, his insights, his philosophies, his creeds, all of these things that I sort of adopted a lot of them. And we went on so many trips. It felt like we had lived an entire lifetime in 1 year. And so I was basically referring to the whole canon of experiences that we'd had.
And his sharing of his, I think you said philosophical and spiritual self and beliefs and feelings, that meant a lot to you?
Yes, very much.
You also say that the world has been blessed because you, referring to Travis, have been here. When you wrote that on June 15th or June 16th of 2008, did you believe that?
I did.
You finish this note to him by saying, I love you. On June 15th or 16th of 2008, did you still feel that same unconditional love, to use your words, for Travis that you were feeling in April of 2008?
Well, I still had love for him, yes, and I was thinking now more in terms of eternity.
Well, that makes sense given the time frame where we're at. But let's maybe take a step back from eternity for a second. Looking at that quote, I love you. Would that be a true statement on June 2nd, 2008?
Yes,
June 3rd,
yes,
2008? June 4th, 2008?
yes.
How about the days in between June 4th, 2008 and his memorial service? Would that be true?
Yes,
How about today? Would
yes,
that be true?
yes, it's still true.
You also talked about you said something. You recall hearing the recorded phone call you had with Mr. Alexander on May 10th, 2008. Recall hearing that?
Yes,
during
I
this
do.
trial? Okay. And something was said on there, because, apart from the spiritual side of your relationship and the friendship and close friendship you shared, there was a sexual aspect to your relationship as well, right?
Yes,
And part of that, anyway, we've seen in the phone call of May 10th, right?
yes,
You made a comment in that tape about him making you feel like a goddess. I believe those were your words. Do you remember that?
yes.
Okay. Refresh our memory, first of all, what he was doing to make you feel like a goddess, or what that was a reference to.
It was a reference to the time that we took a bath together when he had all the candles everywhere and rose petals and there was music. And it wasn't just, it didn't go quickly. It was drawn out, it was romantic.
And that made you feel great, right?
Yes,
Were there other times in your relationship, your sexual relationship, where it could be said you felt like a goddess?
were there other times?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Describe those for us.
Well, it was more just how, rather than the act, it almost could have been almost any act, but it was how he made me feel and how his demeanor was and how he treated me during those things that made me feel special. And like, it wasn't just for physical gratification, it was because our minds and our hearts were sort of in alignment as well.
Is that a feeling that you experienced before in your life, before Mr. Alexander?
I would say yes, I've experienced it before.
To this degree?
Well, as far as the way he put me on a pedestal, no, not to that degree.
And you say he put you on a pedestal. We talked about it. We talked a little bit this morning about, you know, the bath, the things he did for you. Were there other things you felt like we haven't talked about where he put you on this pedestal?
It was more like the way he would look at me sometimes, compliments he would give me, and sometimes just out of the blue he would recall something that I did, or a thought he had that day, and usually it was in terms of elevating me above all else kind of thing. And I mean, I didn't really believe it, but I believed that he might believe it. So it made me feel special because he viewed me that way, that I was somebody special.
So in terms of your relationship with Mr. Alexander then, there were times when you were way up here on this pedestal, right?
Yes.
And there were other times you were down on the ground being kicked, right?
Yes.
Objection, meeting.
Abstained.
You were right way up here on this pedestal, right?
Yes.
You were also down on the ground, is that correct?
Yes.
Being kicked?
Objection, meeting.
Were you kicked while you were on the ground?
Once I was, yes. On one occasion, I mean, he kicked me twice.
Objection, no question before the witness.
Abstained.
Okay. So we have a relationship with lots of highs and lots of lows, right?
Yes.
Now, you testified previously that you met Travis in September 2006. You talked about your relationship. You were in a relationship with Mr. Brewer. You talked to us eventually about the time that you became a couple with Mr. Alexander and times when you weren't a couple with Mr. Alexander. Do you recall doing that?
Yes.
Okay. What I want to talk about now is, because it may not be clear, and you were asked about, do you recall being asked about after breaking up why you felt like you had permission to be over at his home, that sort of thing? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And in that regard, what was the difference? First starting, say, for example, with the interaction between you and Mr. Alexander, of when you were a couple, by the definitions that you and he had used, as opposed to when you weren't a couple by that same definition. Was there a difference in terms of how you interacted with each other?
As far as, well, in my mind, I drew a distinction. We still continued to be intimate and hang out and go on dates and travel and talk late at night and email and chat and text back and forth. All those things continued, but I drew a distinction in my mind that he's no longer my boyfriend. I'm no longer his girlfriend. We're just maybe going to get back together or maybe not. It was kind of like that. We were in a state of limbo for a while.
Well, let's break that down a little bit if we could. You were having a sexual relationship with Mr. Alexander before you became a couple, correct?
Yes.
And that sexual relationship, that included oral sex?
Yes.
Did it include anal sex before you were a couple?
Just the one time the night I was baptized, and that ended pretty quickly.
Okay. And did it include, vaginal sex?
No.
Okay. So when you became a couple then, did the sexual relationship, did that somehow automatically change the sexual boundaries between the two of you?
No, it didn't really change. We tried to keep the same standards, I guess you could say.
The standards being the law of chastity as told to you by Mr. Alexander, is that right?
Objection.
Stay.
Are we talking about the laws of chastity as told to you by Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
And that standard, to your understanding, what did that prohibit? What act did that prohibit?
It prohibited premarital vaginal sex.
Okay. And you had told us about the incident where you were sleeping and you woke up with Mr. Alexander's penis inside your vagina. Do you remember telling us about that?
Yes.
Was he your boyfriend at that time?
Yes.
So you didn't have vaginal intercourse until you were boyfriend and girlfriend, correct? That would have been the first time, so.
Yeah, but it wasn't regular. It was, I guess I kind of looked at it as an accident or a mistake, and we didn't do that again until after we broke up.
You say that you saw this first encounter where he was inside your vagina with his penis as an accident or mistake. Is that right?
Yes.
Is that what you were describing? Okay. How is it that you can rationalize or characterize this invasion in that way?
Objection. Characterization, invasion, character, and rationalize.
Restate your question.
He places his penis in your vagina when you're asleep, right?
Yes.
And you just told us you wrote that off to a mistake.
That's how I looked at it.
Now, I could drop a pen and it'd be a mistake, but it'd be hard to do what he did as a mistake. So how do you get there in your mind?
Well, we were sleeping and no words were exchanged. All of his motor skills were functioning, but I don't know that if he was really like mentally conscious or not. He was there, he was breathing hard, that kind of thing, but he didn't say anything, and it was never mentioned the next day, so I assumed maybe he wasn't fully aware of what he was doing, because maybe he was groggy or disoriented or still half asleep. I don't know.
Okay. Getting back to the idea of you and Mr. Alexander as a couple and not a couple, you broke up on what date?
June 29th, 2007.
Okay. As we've heard, though, June 29th, 2007 was not the end of your sexual relationship with him, right?
That's right.
So in that regard, one has to ponder, what does that what did the end of that relationship mean in terms of your relationship with Travis?
It meant to me that we were now two sovereign single adults.
A lot of people, when they break up, and can you understand that a lot of people, when they break up, that's the end of things. They stop sleeping together, they stop contacting each other, right?
Rejection leading violence to other people.
Sustained.
After you broke up, you said, your words more like intergovernmental relations. You said you were both two sovereign states, right?
Rejection
Is that what I heard?
Yes, we were single and free to make our own decisions.
Okay. Single and free to make your own decisions. Yet you then, by your testimony, were still making the decision to engage in sexual relations with Mr. Alexander, correct?
Rejection as an answer B.
Overruled in the answer.
Yes, I was still making that decision.
And you were asked about, well, based on your assessment of this breakup, then, was he, to use your words, as a sovereign state, free to engage in sexual activity with whomever he chose, in your mind?
In my mind, except for the moral implications, I believe that he was free to do that, and it would be something that I shouldn't take offense to because he's not my boyfriend any longer.
Well, what about other concerns? What about health concerns? Did you feel like he was obligated to let you know if he engaged in sexual behavior with anyone else because of fear of sexually transmitted diseases?
That was one concern I had, yes.
Did you and he discuss that situation? We're broken up, but we're still going to have sex, but I'm going to let you know if I start with someone else?
There was a conversation somewhat like that, so I assumed he would just tell me if he decided to date somebody else. That's why I asked him when I saw him with that girl, but it wasn't, as far as STDs and that kind of thing, we didn't have a sit-down discussion about it.
Okay. And you mentioned the girl. You're talking about when you went to Mr. Alexander's home, you saw him with this girl through the window,
Yes.
right? And you were asked, why was it okay for you to be there after you had broken up? Do you recall being asked that?
Yes.
Why was it okay for you to be there?
Well, the night that I went there, it was okay because he gave me the green light. I called him before going. He said, sure. It was a very brief.
Rejection hearsay.
That night, he encouraged you to come over. Is that what you're telling us?
He didn't encourage me. He just gave me permission. I needed to get my social security card.
Okay. This issue of this discussion you had with Travis about this girl, were you angry during this discussion?
No. I was actually frightened a little bit.
What do you mean
I was not, I guess frightened isn't the word, but intimidated. I didn't want to be confrontational. I wanted to just throw it out there and let him know it's okay. If you're dating someone, you can let me know. I'm going to be cool about that, but I want to know rather than sticking around and, while he kept giving me intermittent doses of incentive to stay and believe in him, we can just be friends and draw a line right now, and you can have your life and I'll have mine, and it's okay. I just wanted to know, is all.
You made a comment before we get too far off that and on confrontation. You said you didn't want to be confrontational just a second ago. You also made the comment during your time with last week that you weren't allowed to be confrontational with Travis. What do you mean by that?
There are a few times when I asserted myself and he checked it very quickly.
Okay. Checked it how?
Usually by verbally snapping back was how it usually went.
When he snapped back verbally, did this cause fear in you?
At first I felt more like a chastised child. Eventually it began to instill fear and intimidation.
Okay. Judge.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take the noon recess. Please be back in the designated area at 1:25. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice lunch. Please be seated. You may step down. We're excused. We are at recess. Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Mr. Nermy, you may continue. Before you do that, ladies and gentlemen, did any of you hear or see anything about this case on the media since I last asked you that question? Has anyone tried to speak with you or influence you in any way about this case? I see no hands to either question. Thank you, Mr. Nermy. You may now continue with redirect.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Arias, before we broke for lunch, we were talking about the discussion you were having with Mr. Alexander after you found him making out with this girl. Do you recall that this morning?
Yes.
Okay. And I believe your words were, in prior testimony, something to the effect that you wanted to understood where you stood in terms of the relationship. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you also mentioned on direct examination, you said that he was still, I believe your word was courting you, right?
Yes.
Okay. What do you mean at this time period that Mr. Alexander was still courting you? What do you mean by that?
Well, after we broke up, he promised he would change, and, he wanted me to move down there, so he paid for me to move down there. And so he would still take me out. We'd go on dates and that kind of thing. he wanted to spend his birthday with me. So those are just things that I felt we were kind of just testing the water to see if maybe we could trust each other again or that kind of thing. So when I saw him, I mean, I knew we were still like not together, still single, but when I saw him with that girl, I thought maybe I should ask if he is dating someone else and just hasn't told me, or find out what the status is so that I can find out where I stand.
Okay. And this conversation you had with him about questioning him where you stood in the greater scheme of things, that is what led him to run up and beat his head against the wall? Is this the same conversation? Or
Well, that wasn't the part. It was the part where I reminded him about how he said I could come over last night, and it, like a flash of realization crossed his face, and I think he just, I mean, I don't know what he was thinking, but I could tell after that part he changed. He got upset.
Okay. And I'm a little confused then, because when you went to have a soup pie, you had told us that, we heard on cross-examination about this backpack and supposedly full of makeup, and that you and Travis were having a fight about that. Do you recall being asked about that on cross-examination?
Yes.
Okay. And the other issue there was that you had told us in prior testimony that there was a fight going on in the bathroom, or bedroom bathroom, behind closed doors that Mr. Dan Freeman wasn't privy to. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay. And this argument, if I recall correctly, related to your interaction with John Dixon. Is that correct?
Yes, it did. He read about that interaction in my journal.
Okay. So, and refresh our memory, if you could briefly, what interaction are we talking about?
I went, at one point, it was right before convention, so it would have been maybe late August. I drove out to, I think it was Irvine, and hung out with John. We just hung out, spent the weekend together, traded files, traded music files, movie files.
Okay.
Went to the beach, went to dinner, that kind of thing. Watched a movie.
Well, I'm a little confused, though. Why was it okay for Travis to be making out with this girl and for you not to be seen or not to hang out with John Dixon?
Well, I was under the impression at the time that it wasn't because I was hanging out with another guy, but because of who the guy was. So that's what I believed then, but the same pattern continued with other guys also.
Okay. And who the guy was is because, at least at this point in time when you were in Irvine with him, he was not a church member. I believe that's what you told us earlier, correct?
He was not a church member, yes. His grandfather was a member of the church, married outside the church, so his children and grandchildren, which would also be John, were not church members.
Okay. And this girl that he was making out with, was her status as a church member ever verified?
I didn't ask.
I guess that means no, huh?
No. Yes, that means no.
Okay.
What's he asking about the
Approach it. May continue.
This girl that Travis was making out with, Was it ever asserted that it was okay, don't worry about it because she's a church member?
No, that was never discussed.
Now, the issue of your sex life with Travis came about in a lot of different ways throughout this case. One of the things that was discussed last week when Mr. Martinez spoke to you is this idea that maybe before he met you, that Mr. Alexander was a virgin. Do you remember being asked about that?
Yes.
Objection, John Stowe, she was never asked that.
Approach, please.
You may continue.
Remind us again, in terms of the sexual behavior you engaged in with Mr. Alexander, what was the first occasion of sexual interaction?
The weekend following convention
Okay, and where did that take place?
at his friend's house in Marietta.
And if I remember correctly, that was oral sex.
Yes.
If it's possible for you to make conclusions like this, based on this sexual interaction, were you of the mindset that Mr. Alexander had no sexual experience prior to this encounter?
No, I was not, based on that interaction and other things he told me prior to it.
So he never led you to believe that he was a virgin through his words?
Objection, yes.
No, if anything, he led me to believe the exact opposite.
The exact opposite being what?
He had more sexual partners than I've had, but mine have been over a longer range of time.
Okay. You also mentioned somewhere down the road after that first sexual encounter, let me ask you, the second sexual encounter, that was the oral sex in your car, correct?
That's correct.
Did he do anything during that encounter that led you to believe that maybe this wasn't his first rodeo, so to speak?
Objection. She has already indicated that they already had sex, so, I mean, relevance is the objection.
Approach, please.
Question, Ms. Arias?
Yes.
So, did he do anything to make you believe that this wasn't his first encounter of this nature?
Yes, he flipped the visor down and angled the mirror so he could have an additional visual vantage point.
Okay. You also mentioned during your testimony that there was a time when Mr. Alexander performed oral sex on you, and your testimony was, I believe, something to the effect that he knew what he was doing. Is that right?
Yes.
And without getting too graphic, if you will, what gave you that impression?
Well, he had bragged about it prior to that, somewhat. that he had studied the female anatomy. And so I was, even though I wasn't expecting things to go that far that night, once they did, it was obvious that, to me, that he knew what he was doing. I mean, I've had other intimate relationships in the past, so I was able to make a comparison in my mind.
Okay. Now, was there ever a point in time that he ever compared your sexual skills with those of other women?
Objection, yes.
Approach, please. Overruled.
Do you remember the question?
Yes. The answer is yes.
Okay. Yes, meaning he did compare your sexual skills to those of other women.
Yes.
Objection, that's been answered. Lead.
Overruled. That answer will stand.
Did he ever compare parts of your anatomy to those of other women?
Objection, yes.
Overruled. You being answer yes or no?
Yes, he does on the sex tape.
Okay. Now, you brought up the sex tape. That's a reference to the phone call you recorded at his behest on May 10th, 2008?
Yes.
Okay. A lot was brought up there, so before we get into that a little more specifically, I want to talk about your prior sexual history, because that was talked about a little bit during your cross-examination. Do you remember that?
Yes.
One of the issues that came up is your history, if you will, for lack of a better word, with anal sex. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. And one of your partners, one of your first relationships, we heard throughout your testimony, was with someone named Bobby Juarez, right?
That's right.
Okay. And in fact, there was a point in time where you were living with him and sexually active with him, right?
Yes.
Okay. And if memory serves, you would have been about 17.
Yes, I was almost 18.
Okay. And he was a few years older than you?
Yes, 3 years older than me.
Okay. One of the things that came up was the idea that you had engaged in anal sex with Mr. Juarez. Do you remember talking about that with Mr. Martinez?
Yes.
Okay. In this regard, was this anal sex something you did on a frequent basis with Mr. Juarez?
No, it was something we tried once, maybe twice. I think just once.
Okay, something that you tried once or twice throughout the course of your entire relationship.
Yes.
Okay. And as it relates to Matt McCartney, that would have been your next significant relationship. I believe, if I understood you correctly, you testified that you never had anal sex with Matt McCartney. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And as it relates to Mr. Brewer, a 3.5 to 4 year relationship, right?
Yes.
Was there anal sex involved in that relationship?
I want to say one time, I think, maybe twice, but I can only remember one specifically.
So based on that, it was certainly not a regular part of your repertoire with Mr. Brewer, right?
Definitely not.
Okay. And Mr. Brewer would have been the sexual partner that directly preceded Mr. Alexander, right?
Yes.
Okay. So at the time, and just for clarity's sake, you had had these relationships with these men. Are these Mr. Brewer and Mr. Juarez? Are they the only people you ever, prior to Mr. Alexander, had anal intercourse with?
Yes.
Okay. So based on what you've told us in your testimony, before you met Travis in your sexual history, you would have had anal sex no more than 4 times. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Okay. Now, when you started engaging in sexual activity with Mr. Alexander, we've heard how part of that included anal sex, correct?
Yes. Well, not in the beginning.
Right, not the beginning, but we heard about the first instance, of anal sex occurring after your baptism, right?
That's right.
Okay. And that was not anything you would ask for, right?
Objection made.
Is that anything you asked for?
No, I didn't ask for that.
Was lubrication used during this encounter?
Not to my knowledge. I think he might have spit on his hand, but I didn't see. I just kind of was going with what I was hearing.
Okay. And you described this encounter as being painful to you, if I recall. Is that right?
Objection made.
Was this a painful encounter for you?
Yes, it was painful that time.
Now, I ask that because one of the things that you talked about with Mr. Martinez is your sex life with Mr. Alexander. And you had said a comment that you enjoyed it, it was mutual. Something to that effect on several different occasions. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Objection relevance as to why he's asking it. He said, I asked this because. Relevance.
Sustained.
You made comments about enjoying your sex life with Mr. Alexander and saying that it was mutual. Do you remember doing that?
Yes.
Okay. When you talk about enjoying it, was that physically enjoying it?
Yes, it was physical. Most of the time, yes.
Sometimes or all the time?
Not all the time, but more than sometimes.
There were some instances, though, as you just told us, that it was painful, correct?
Yes.
Okay. That painful interaction on the day of your baptism, was that enjoyable to you? And on any level?
That particular segment was not enjoyable at all.
You also mentioned that there were times, you just testified that there were times that it wasn't, physically pleasurable. On those times when it wasn't physically pleasurable, did you get something else out of it?
Yes, I did.
What was that?
It made me feel good to make him feel good, and also when I was making him feel good, he had all of his attention focused on me, so I feel like it was still, like a trade-off kind of. I mean, like, I liked the way I felt when he was focused on me that way, and I liked the way I felt when I could make him feel good, if that makes sense.
Okay. Well, let's try to make a little more sense out of that with one of the encounters. You told us that there were occasions when you would come out onto the porch, nude, perform oral sex upon him, and he would ejaculate on your face. You remember
Yes.
telling us about that?
Yes.
Okay. Was that physically pleasurable to you?
I wouldn't say there was any physical pleasure that I derived from it.
So talking about what you told us just a moment ago, what kind of pleasure did you get out of it? Is that the pleasure of pleasing him? Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, it had been a fantasy he'd had for over a year that I had known him, and so it was something that we hadn't fulfilled in the past, and we're able to do it now based on the configuration of the porch of the house that I lived in.
Okay. You also, when you were asked about this sex you had with Travis, you made the comment on direct that you felt like a used piece of toilet paper. Do you recall that?
Yes, that was that one time during my baptism. or
During your
after.
baptism. But there was also kind of maybe not that exact comment, but a similar comment you made when you were driving home from Ehrenberg. Do you remember that?
Yes.
What was your mindset there in terms of the sexual activity?
Well, my mindset didn't really develop until after a few days of him not contacting me or returning any of my attempts to contact him. I drove away kind of with a little bit of a sinking feeling because he wasn't very affectionate when we parted, just kind of blah, just sort of checked out. So I thought maybe he's just tired. And just as the days began to go by, the whole weekend went by, and I didn't hear from him until Tuesday night. So by that point, I thought that I'd just been really dumb.
And that was, and I think I used the wrong explanation. That, I believe, you testified to that you felt used like a prostitute on that occasion, right?
It kind of reminded me of that, yes.
But that, you weren't feeling that way while the activity was taking place, but only afterwards when you were driving home. Is that?
Yes, after I just sort of reflected on it and how it all came about.
Okay. Now it seems all this continued sexual interaction after you broke up, and even after January of 2008, was motivated, based on what you've told us, on two things. There was a sexual component to it. Is that accurate? A physical component to it, I should say.
Will you start over? I'm sorry.
Sure. The sexual activity you had with Mr. Alexander after you broke up that continued all the way until June 4th, there was a physically gratifying component of that on most occasions, right?
Yes.
And there was a seemingly always, whether it was physically gratifying to you or not, an emotionally satisfying component to you for making him happy. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Was there any other reasons why you continued to have sexual relations with him after you broke up?
Well, after I walked in on him,
I would object. She was asked were there any other reasons.
She's explaining the reasons, Judge.
Explain the reasons.
okay. There weren't any other reasons prior to January 21st, 2008, but there were after that. And the reason was I was under the impression that he felt more satiated and he felt more normal when he had just more adult interactions, if that makes sense.
So there was a component of assistance, if you will, in your sexual activity, assisting Travis.
I would say that. I wasn't looking at it that way, but it was much like that, yes.
Moving ourselves to the tape. Well, before we get to the tape, let's talk about some of the text messages without going through the specifics of them, but there were several things that were brought up in these text messages, things that you said. You made the comment in the text message that you wanted to have sex with him like a horny little schoolgirl. Do you remember being shown that message?
Yes.
And if you could speak up.
Yes.
Why would you send a message like that to him? What was the purpose?
Well, the schoolgirl thing was one of his fantasies, and it only shows the two messages, but that was a long thread of back and forth on my way back from Las Vegas while I was driving. And so it just kept escalating, and that's when he sent me another picture of himself, and we just kept trying to top ourselves, so we were trying to get more and more graphic and explicit.
Well, in that regard, though, was that the idea of the schoolgirl in the outfit, was that something that you were interested in, or was it something you were doing to please him?
It would be more for his pleasure, because just being with him was enough for me, but he enjoyed that kind of stuff, so yeah. Okay.
So, in terms of your sex life prior to Mr. Alexander, you didn't dress up as a schoolgirl?
No, I didn't dress up as anything prior to him.
Okay. You also made the comment in some of these text messages that you wanted to give him a blowjob. BJ, which is probably what you put in the text messages. Why did you send him text messages to that effect?
Well, we just had a sex life and it just kept things interesting.
Okay. Why was it important to you for things to stay interesting?
It depends on the timeline. But I enjoyed spending time with him, and usually the only times that we spent together where it was enjoyable was when he was focused on me in that sort of manner. Usually after that it would be if we were in public spending time together, we weren't really doing anything or interacting in any sort of pleasant way. And if we were not engaging in intimate things and we were alone together, then sometimes we were just fighting. So it was more pleasant to be loving, I guess, for lack of a better word.
And it sounds like you engaged in these sexual encounters so you could get love and affection back from Mr. Alexander. Is that what you're telling us?
Objection.
Are you telling us that you were willing to pay this price in order to get this affection from Mr. Alexander?
Objection.
Overruled.
I wouldn't term it like that, but when I did,
Objection will be answered with a question. Yes or no?
Thank you. Thank you.
You wouldn't put it like that. How would you put it?
I would just put it as spending time with him. That's how I looked at it, spending time with him, doing things that he liked to do, where I received a good reaction from him. So in turn, I like to do those things too, for those reasons.
Okay. In those text messages that you were shown, you also make reference to, wanting a facial, to, his penis being a lollipop. Were you doing that along the same reasons that we were talking about before, to get his approval or to keep it interesting for him?
Objection.
Sustained.
Why did you make comments of that nature in the text messages?
Well, again, with those particular text messages, we were trying to top each other. We kept going back and forth. It got more and more graphic, more and more explicit. And we were trying to just be witty, so every time I topped his comment, he tried to top mine, and it was something that we did back and forth on a few occasions, more than a few occasions, but that was just part of our relationship. So that's how we interacted at times.
And you got positive reinforcement from those texts as well. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I did.
Judge, can we approach?
Gentlemen, please go back to the jury room for a few minutes. Probably will be 10 to 15 minutes. Please remember the admonition. You are excused.
Please stand for the jury.
The record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ladies and gentlemen, you may be seated. Mr. Nurmi, you may continue outside the presence of the jury.
Problem being right now, the system seems to be.
It's rebooting. Take just a second.
The way you know that it sounds like you're this 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
It sounds like what?
A 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. I check off every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Are you serious?
There's been many times when you've been like miserable and I've like raped you. You cannot say I don't work that booty.
Oh, never mind. You do know how to work the booty.
Yeah, we've had 2 and 3 hour sessions many times.
Yeah.
I think 3.5 is like our tops or something.
You remember that time I came to visit you when I was still working in California? And I fell asleep on your chair next to your bed. And you just like woke me up by pulling my pants off and totally licking my pussy.
Yeah. You gotta admit though, like there's not many guys that would do that just for fun. I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
What's that?
I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass. I'm going to zip tie your arms around the tree, blindfold you, and put the camera on a timer while I'm parking you. Just think of how I pounded you with a full 6-year-old pop until it was nothing. I didn't like the pop rock as much as I liked the 6-year-old pop though. Like you ride my freaking face, go horse.
Yeah.
You get some 69 picks too.
69 picks?
I'm gonna get some great shots of freaking put that in here. Like the actual putting it in you and like your reaction and just the angles and the whole bit. Seriously, honey, I don't want to close you right now so bad. Because I'm touching yourself. I can't wait to get pictures of jizzle on your face. I'll try to get one ad on coming on your face. I want to give you a cream pie, too.
What's that? What's a cream pie?
So I blow my wad right, just like a quarter inch inside your pussy. I mean, it's gonna be like legitimate porn.
Yeah.
In every sense, you know what I mean? Everything about like the details of your body are so hot. Like those big, freaking nipples. I could come at any moment. From my dick in every orifice of your body. Because I want to get like some like park ranger type outfit for me to wear. Oh, honey, the pictures I'm going to take are so hot. Like one of them's going to be me laying on my back, cock hard, you know, sticking straight out. So we'll take some video too. Oh, yeah, it's huge. I just did like 15 pumps. Which is surprising because, you know, I drank it this morning. Seriously, I could, if I was in a sperm bank, I could have retired off this load.
Counsel. you ready?
Yes.
Yes.
All right, it will be Exhibit 509.
Well, can we rush?
Yes. All right, let's bring in the jury.
And did you say around 3:25?
Yes.
Okay.
Take a break at 3:20.
Sure.
Please stand for the jury.
Please be seated. The record will show the presence of the jury, the defendant, and all counsel. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. While you were in the jury room, the court admitted Exhibit 509. Exhibit 509 is a portion of Exhibit 460. In a few moments, defense counsel will play Exhibit 509 for you. As it is being played, you will see words appear on the screen. It is up to you to determine the accuracy of the words you see on the screen as you listen to the recording. The exhibit admitted and the exhibit that will go with you back to the jury room will not have the words on it. Those words are being provided at this time to assist you as you listen to the portions of Exhibit 460. Are there any questions? Mr. Nermi, you may continue.
Ms. Arias, as it relates to Exhibit 460, you were here in court when that was played, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you recall being asked some questions about fantasy and reality as it relates to this tape. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. What I want to do for you now is play some snippets of the tape and ask you some questions. If you could just watch as we go.
Okay.
The way you know that it sounds like you're this 12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. It's so hot.
Can you see that quote on the screen?
Yes.
Was that something that you wanted him to say or encouraged him to say?
I didn't encourage him to say it.
Is it something you wanted him to say?
I just wanted him to say what he wanted to say. I didn't get speak.
Okay. And going back to the question of fantasy or reality for him, do you know if this was fantasy or reality?
Well,
Objection, it's a yes or no question.
Sustained.
Do you know if it's fantasy or reality? Or if you don't know, you don't know.
I don't know. I think it was fantasy.
Objection, then. She said she doesn't know anything else.
Sustained.
You weren't 12 at the time of this phone call, were you?
No.
Okay. Fantasy or reality is kind of gross either way, isn't it?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Let's move on to the next highlight.
Sounds like what?
12-year-old girl having her first orgasm. I check off every day, sometimes 2-3 times a day.
Are you serious?
There's been many times when you've been like miserable and I've like raped you.
You were asked about, going back to the previous clip, you were asked about his masturbation habits or that you inspired them. Did you somehow dictate how often he masturbated?
No.
He also says there have been many times when you have been miserable, and I've raped you. Is that fantasy or is that reality?
That's reality, but he doesn't mean rape, like how the law defines it. I don't think.
Did you have fantasies about being raped by Mr. Alexander?
Not rape, just maybe ravished or something, but not raped, I would say.
Let's move on.
You cannot say I don't work that booty.
Oh, never mind. You do know how to work the booty.
Yeah, we've had 2 and 3 hour sessions many times.
Yeah.
This 2-hour, 3-hour sessions, is that a reference to the reality of your sex life with him prior to May 10th, 2008?
Yes, prior to moving back to California.
And in those 2 and 3-hour sessions, based on what you told us before, you enjoyed most of those physically, but also because of the fact that you were making him happy. Is that right?
Objection, leading.
Is it accurate that part of the reason for these sessions was not only the physical satisfaction, but the positive attention you got from him during those times?
Same objection, leading.
Sustained.
You get positive attention from him during those 2 or 3 hours?
Yes, I did.
And you enjoyed that positive attention, right?
Objection, leading.
Overruled. You may answer.
Yes, always.
I think 3.5 later.
You remember that time I came to visit you when I was still living in California? And I fell asleep on your chair next to your bed. And you just woke me up by pulling my pants off and totally licking my pussy.
Yeah. You gotta admit though, there's not many guys that would do that just for fun. I'm gonna tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way.
As it relates to the previous clip, the fact that Mr. Alexander wanted to perform oral sex on you for such a lengthy period of time, was that something that made you feel good?
Objection, seems facts out of evidence. He woke her up that way, not 2 or 3 hour session.
Sustained.
Okay, when he woke you up and you were asleep, you weren't conscious and consenting to that activity. Is that correct?
Objection, leading.
Rephrase.
You were asleep the time he referred to just in that call, right? You were asleep when you took your pants off.
Yes, I woke up in the process. I was sleeping.
And because you were asleep, you didn't consent to him doing any of those things before you woke up. Is that accurate?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
Would it be fair to say that you didn't consent to anything because you were asleep?
Objection leading.
Sustained.
When you're asleep, can people talk to you and ask you questions, yes or no? You would answer them if you're asleep?
Not if I'm actually sleeping. Maybe
Okay.
I would.
So when you were asleep on this chair, did Miss Alexander say, hey, Jodi, can I take your pants off and have oral sex with you?
Objection like a foundation. She was asleep. How would she know?
That's my point.
To me answer.
Did you ask if I would know? Or-
No, I asked, did Travis say to you while you were sleeping, hey, Jodi, can I take your pants off and perform oral sex?
No.
Well, objection.
So,
Objection. Say objection. He has no foundation.
it was already
Oh,
overruled.
overruled. You may proceed.
Were you flattered by the fact that he wanted to do that to you for that long?
Objection mischaracterizes the evidence lack a foundation. Do that what? For that what long?
Sustained as to foundation.
Okay, Jodi. Were you flattered by the fact that he wanted to perform oral sex upon you for a long period, the 2 to 3 hour period of time, or the long period of time he talked about in the tape?
Objection. Compound question. Is he asking 2 or 3 hours or in the tape?
Well, I don't think that particular time was 2 or 3 hours, but of course I was flattered. He wanted to surprise me, I think, but yeah, I was flattered. I was kind of embarrassed, but I was flattered.
Okay. Now, moving to this next quote. I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass, by the way. We heard about prior instances of anal sex prior to May 10th. So is this fantasy or is this reality?
We're kicking around ideas of what we might do. I hope that was fantasy because I don't think I would have gone for that, but I'm not sure whether or not he had serious intentions of doing that act or not.
Did you ever, you said you don't think you would submit to that, but did you ever do anything to try to make this fantasy happen?
Yes.
What did you do?
He asked me to find a place that would be good where we could do that, and so I hiked around a little bit and thought it was near this park that's mostly wooded toward the south end of town. And I figured I was trying to think of the best time so that, it's kind of in public so that nobody would stumble upon us. So just that, basically.
So this might have been one of those fantasies that might have become a reality.
Objection leading speculations.
Let's go on to the next quote.
I'm going to tie you to a tree and put it in your ass. And I'm going to zip tie your arms around the tree, blindfold you, and put the camera on a timer while I'm parking it. Just think of how I pounded you with a full Tootsie Roll Pop until it was nothing.
The quote we just heard, I was a little late on hitting the pause, but the quote we just heard about Tootsie Pops, that was a reference to the encounter, the day that Mr. Alexander, you and Mr. Alexander took a bath, and that was used later on.
Objection leading for more than one occasion when they engaged in this conduct.
Continue your question.
Is The day you used the Tootsie Pop, is that also the day you took a bath with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
There was much discussion last week when Mr. Martinez was speaking with you about whether you enjoyed that encounter or not. And I believe you said that you had enjoyed aspects of that encounter. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Okay. Which aspects did you enjoy?
Well, I think we used bubbles that time with the bath, so I enjoyed that. I guess the Tootsie Pop was just for fun. I enjoyed his attention. I didn't really like the Pop Rocks as much, how he wanted to use them. So that was probably one of the 2 or 3 hour things he was talking about, because it lasted a while.
Well, to clarify then what you were asked on cross-examination, when he was using the Tootsie Pops on you, you weren't enjoying that physically, you were enjoying the attention you were getting from him. Is that correct?
Just leaving.
When he was using the Tootsie Pops on you, was it physically pleasurable to you?
There was some physical pleasure, I guess. It wasn't uncomfortable or anything.
What other pleasure did you derive from that?
His attention, I guess. It sounds simple, but it was just about us, we shut the door and it was our own space and it was just our time together. So I enjoyed that.
Okay.
I didn't like it all fucking much. I liked it 2-year-old Pop though. Like you could ride my freaking face. Go a horse.
Yeah.
You get some 69 pics too.
69 pics?
I'm gonna get some great shots. I'll freaking put that in here. Like the action.
Talks about getting some great shots, putting it in you. What's that a reference to?
Sex.
What is he putting in you? May be obvious, but what?
His penis.
And some great shots there. What is he referring to? Are we talking about taking pictures? Are we talking about making a video?
He's talking about the photographs at this point with his new camera that he was excited about.
As it relates to taking nude photographs, is that something that you were completely comfortable with and encouraged?
I was never completely comfortable with the nude photographs, but I was willing to. It took a while, it took, I guess, close to 1.5 years, but I was willing to go along with it. As long as it got deleted.
Well, putting it in you and like the reaction and just the angles and the whole bit. Seriously, honey, I want to post you right now for that. Because I'm touching yourself. I can't wait to get pictures of jizzle on your face.
Let me see if I can progress a little bit.
Try to get one as I'm traveling up your face.
This particular act of him ejaculating on your face was mentioned a couple times in these slides. Is that something that you got physical enjoyment out of?
Not like physical pleasure, actually. Sometimes it hurt if it got in my eyes, but other than that, it wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't, like my preferred method or anything.
If you didn't get physical pleasure out of it, what, if anything, did you get out of it?
Just it made me feel good to know that he was enjoying himself. If he was gratified, I felt better about myself, that I was able to provide that gratification for him.
Continue on.
I want to give you a cream pie, too.
What's that? What's a cream pie?
Prior to Mr. Alexander, explaining this cream pie to you, did you know what it was? What he was talking about?
No, I didn't know what that term meant.
So I blow my wad out, right? Just like a quarter inch inside your pussy. I mean, it's gonna be like legitimate porn.
Having him give you this cream pie and making quote-unquote legitimate porn, was that something you were willing to do to please him?
I was willing to do that.
To please him?
Yes, certainly.
Did you have some independent desire on your own to make this porn?
Well, not photographing it or filming it or recording it or anything like that.
Okay.
No, not like that.
Yeah.
In every sense, you know what I mean? Everything about, like, the details of your body are so hot. It goes big.
Comments like that of a sexual nature about your body, did those make you feel good?
Yeah, they made me feel good.
Freaking nipples. I keep coming anymore. From my dick and every orifice of your body. Because I want to get like some like park ranger type outfit for me to wear. I'll tell you the pictures I'm going to take. They're so hot. If one of them's going to be me laying on my back, cock hard, stick.
Again, going back to these, one of them, is he referring to pictures?
Yes, different positions.
And again, you said you were uncomfortable and getting more comfortable with this. Is that correct? Or
I was getting accustomed to the idea of doing it.
Yeah. So we'll take some video too.
were you comfortable with video?
I'm kind of self-conscious in front of the lens, but I was willing to try it as long as it got deleted. I was okay with that.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. I just did like 15 pumps. Which is surprising because, I drank it this morning. Seriously, I could,
The fact that you were able to make, by his words, reach orgasm, we'll put it that way, did that make you feel good about yourself?
Yeah, I got satisfaction from doing that.
it's perfect. It's going to retire off this load.
Okay. there was an issue raised about fidelity and you kissing Ryan Burns on June 5th. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And do you recall the testimony of Miss Diodone, Lisa Diodone, then Lisa Andrews, that she was dating Travis Alexander at the same period of time that you were either in a relationship with Mr. Alexander or having sexual intercourse with Mr. Alexander? Do you remember that?
Objection beyond scope. Please, Andrews or Dion is not mentioned by the state.
Approach.
Jodi, before we go into some of these issues, if you'd be so kind as to tell us what your belief in terms of what being monogamous in a relationship means.
Well, in a boyfriend-girlfriend relationship, it can mean a lot of things to a lot of people, but to me it means that you're committed to that person. You're not, you're not with other people, sleeping with other people, or maybe there's kind of a gray area, but acting inappropriately with other people out of respect for your boyfriend or girlfriend.
I know you mentioned in your cross-examination that you were, I think your words were hyper-literal, right?
Yes.
Okay. In that regard, then, you just defined monogamy for us. What then to you does infidelity mean?
Infidelity I associate a little bit more with marriage, but in a committed relationship, infidelity can also mean if that person was unfaithful in that they pursued something with another person independent of the relationship that that person is in. I think in marriage it goes a little farther. It's more about in your mind and heart as well, not just your actions.
Okay. So let me ask you this then, as it relates to your relationship with Mr. Alexander. Per your definitions and your feeling then, would you have believed or assumed that at the time period that you and Mr. Alexander were boyfriend and girlfriend, that you would have been monogamous?
During that time period, yes, I believe that.
Okay. And during that time period then, had he been sexual with another woman, would you, in your mind, define that as an act of infidelity?
Objection, lack of foundation. Sexual meaning sleeping with other people or acting inappropriately.
Sustained.
Okay. When you're Mr. Alexander, you and Mr. Alexander are a couple, if he kissed another girl, would that be an act of infidelity?
Well, if it's like a relative, no, but yeah, and if it's in a romantic way, of course, yes, I would consider that.
Okay. I should have been more clear with your hyperliteral personality, but let's go on then.
Object to the comment, it has to be stricken.
Sustained.
Okay. So then if he had romantically kissed another girl, that would be infidelity. Would I be correct in assuming then if he engaged in other sexual acts, such as oral sex, that would be an act of infidelity when you were boyfriend or girlfriend? In your mind?
In my mind, yes, I would consider that infidelity.
And anything else of a sexual nature, without going through every sexual act in the book, so to speak, that would also be an act of infidelity in your mind. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Okay. So refresh our memory then as to the point in time when you were boyfriend and girlfriend. You were in a couplehood, if you will, with Mr. Alexander.
Did you say when?
When?
I would say February 2nd when we had the conversation to make things official, and that was 2007 until June 29th, 2007 when we broke up.
Okay. So during that time period, were you aware of any acts that you would define as infidelity?
I was not aware. Well, I had a feeling, but I didn't see.
Yeah, let's go to the question now. Said she was not aware.
Sustained.
Now, the discussion was held about Ryan Burns and you kissing Ryan Burns on June 4th, and that was brought up to whether or not you were being disloyal to Mr. Alexander, correct?
Yes.
Now, you weren't Mr. Alexander's girlfriend on June 4th of 2008, right?
No, I wasn't.
Okay. Were you aware of Mr. Alexander engaging in other sexual behavior at the same time, with other individuals at the same time that he was engaging in sexual behavior with you?
At what time period?
Any time period.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned, we've talked about the time when you went to his home in 2007 and saw him kissing another girl. That be one of those instances you're talking about?
Where he was with me and also with somebody else?
Yes.
Yes, like not in a committed relationship, but we were physical together in that regard.
Were there other instances of that sort of behavior that you were aware of with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Describe those for us.
Well, there are things that I became aware of after the fact.
Okay.
So,
Objection, hearsay.
Overruled. Next question.
So apart from this action that you saw in 2007, you're not aware of Mr. Alexander. At the time, you weren't aware of Mr. Alexander engaging in sexual behavior with anyone else but you and this girl. Is that accurate?
sexual, yes. I saw the romantic gestures, but not sexual.
Okay. In that regard, though, who is Chaitanya Lay?
Chaitanya Lay is a girl that Travis wanted to have a threesome with.
Objection, hearsay.
Approach, please. Actually, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a 10-minute recess, since you did have a 15-minute recess about an hour ago. So 10 minutes, please be back in the designated area at 3:35. Please remember the admonition.
Please stand for the jury.
Counsel, please approach.
point to talk about your journals. All right.
Yes.
You were shown Exhibit 455. But before we go to that, then, while the system is rebooting, let me show you what's been marked as Exhibit 242.001, if I may approach her. In this regard, you can take a look at that. Are all the pages in that journal complete?
No.
Are all the pages that were originally contained in that journal still in there now?
No.
If you could be so kind, could you hold up for the jury and show us where pages are actually ripped?
Yes. Do you want dates or anything, or just?
No, if you could just physically show
Okay.
torn
There's
pages.
half a page here and a following page that was ripped out.
Could you perhaps stand up and show?
Okay. There is half a page here, another page here that was ripped out. There's a piece here. There are other parts also.
I'm sorry, could you speak up?
Yeah, there's a few other places in here that where pages were ripped out. I just would have to find them. I think I know by date on one. Was around the end of October.
Okay. I'm approaching end, Judge. Does it appear there's pages missing out of the entry on September 9th, 2007?
Yes.
Okay. These pages that were either partially removed or completely removed, how did that come to pass?
Objection like a foundation, she indicated there was more than one area.
Okay, the page that was torn in half, how did that come to occur?
Objection like a foundation, the timing of that.
Overall, do you answer?
That one, even though chronologically it was before some others, that one was torn out after after I removed some pages that I had written in about John Dixon because it caused me so much grief.
Distinct.
Okay. The page that were torn, the page you showed us, page or two that were torn in part, do you recall why you removed those sections? Or did you, let's start there. Did you remove those sections?
Objection, that's the answer, she said she did.
Overall.
I removed the half page was August 26th, 2007, and I removed that page and the one following it.
And why did you remove that partial page and the one following it?
It's pretty vague now, but I was just going on and on about suicide. It was pretty negative. There are a lot of entries about that, but this one was just a lot more, I don't know, it was very negative about myself, and I didn't want it to be in my journal anymore.
And the pages near the entries dated September 9th, 2007, we were looking at how a few of those were removed. Do you recall why those were? Well, let me ask you this. Do you recall who removed those?
I removed those ones.
Okay. And why did you remove those pages?
I removed those ones because they detailed the weekend that I spent with John Dixon. And when Travis read it and exploded, I thought...
The answer.
Let your answer.
It just caused me so much grief that I didn't want that to even be in there anymore, because I just didn't want it in there anymore in case he was reading it again in the future.
Okay, now, we saw this journal here. This is the journal that the pages were ripped out of, correct?
Yes.
We saw this journal here. We saw some other journals. And a question was asked of you about the privacy of your journals. Right? And so it begins the question, if they were private, why would it matter if you wrote about John Dixon in them? In any of the journals?
They were not private. Not as private as I wanted them to be.
Not as private as you wanted. Who, besides yourself, had access to your journals?
Well, Travis would read them, and also Mormons are encouraged to write journals with the idea in mind that they will pass those journals on to their posterity. So sometimes I would write that with that in mind. Sometimes I was a little more free-flowing, but definitely Travis had read it on several occasions.
You mentioned posterity, meaning it could be passed down to future generations. Is that what you're telling us?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And would you then, for posterity purposes or any other purpose, not want to have anything negative in your journal?
Objection leading.
Overruled, you mean, sir?
That would be one of the reasons.
What would the other reason be?
Well, there's a few reasons. There's that one. There's also the fact that Travis could potentially read something that I wrote in there. And the biggest reason was the law of attraction. It was a huge philosophy of mine at that time in my life. And one of the aspects of that law states that you're not to read about.
I want to check on grounds of condemnation. She said at that time there were 3 or 4 journals. There were different time periods. So which time period is she referring to?
Okay. The law of attraction. When were you introduced to it?
Initially, I became acquainted with it in 1999, or maybe it was 2000, actually.
Okay. And was this a principle or a philosophy that you followed from that point on?
Not religiously. It was something I was familiar with. Maybe it was in the back of my mind here and there. It certainly had an effect on me wanting to be positive, but it wasn't a big part of my life at that time.
You say it wasn't a big part of your life. At what time?
2000.
Okay. Was it a big part of your life between 2006? Well, was it a big part of your life when you were in a relationship, friendship, interacting, what have you, with Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Now, in that regard, you've mentioned a couple times that the law of attraction would be a reason why you wouldn't put anything negative in your journals. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Could you explain that? How writing something negative in your journal would contradict with the law of attraction?
Yes, I'll do my best to explain it. The idea behind the law of attraction is that we live in a vibrational universe, and that everything down to the atomic level is vibrating to a certain frequency, which creates what you see everywhere, including sound and sight and light and all of that, and physical matter. And so the idea is that when you have a certain thought, it begets an emotion, and the emotion changes the vibration on a molecular level within your body, and that in turn affects your environment around you in a subtle way, in that it can draw negative things or positive things depending on what your predominant thoughts are. In that regard, you're encouraged to not focus on negative things or read about or write about or talk about things of a negative nature that you don't want to come into your life. So although I wrote about some negative things in my journal, I wasn't very explicit. One of the things they say that can speed up the law of attraction is if you write about something in great detail, you get into the detail, into the feeling of it, into the emotion of it, and it speeds up the manifestation process, so to speak. So I didn't get in depth with certain things.
So then, as it relates to negative things in your journal, you believe that had you documented instances that Travis had been violent with you, that would beget more violence? Is that what you're telling us?
Sustained.
How would writing about Travis being violent with you in your journal violate this law of attraction that you were following?
One of the things that the law of attraction encourages is when you're in a relationship with somebody to focus only on their good qualities, and more of those good qualities will come forth in the relationship as opposed to the negative qualities. When you're harping on somebody's faults all the time, those seem bigger than the qualities that you're looking for. So that was just one of the reasons. The other was I didn't want Travis to read about that. And the third, of course, is I didn't want...
She was asked about this law of attraction.
Next question, sustained.
Why then would you not write, and maybe it's the same reason, anything about seeing Mr. Alexander masturbate to the image of a child? Why would you not write that in your journal?
Well, there are a lot of reasons. The biggest reason is I couldn't imagine writing something like that, like, okay, today I walked in on Travis beating off to pictures of kids. I couldn't write something like that in my journal because that's horrific to me, and I did have personal concern that if something like that were written in my journal that could come back to haunt me. It's definitely not something that I wanted to record for history's sake. And again, being involved in the church at that time, we're encouraged to record things. Mormons are very big on record keeping. And I would have much preferred to have just erased that day from the record. And I never would have put something like that would also jeopardize Travis's life or his, I don't know, something illegal about him. I wouldn't want to put that in my journal, something that could compromise his status.
And would those same reasons you just stated be the reason why you didn't talk about any of the violent incidents in your journals?
Yes, again, he would read them.
She tries to tell us
No,
yes or no.
I asked her the reasons, not a yes or no question. I asked her the reasons why she didn't put these in.
Question.
These violent, we talked about many, half dozen or so violent incidents with Mr. Alexander throughout the course of your testimony. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Okay. On cross-examination, it was pointed out that there was no record of this anywhere in your journals. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. My question to you, and we talked about this as it relates to a few incidents, but as it relates to all these incidents, why wouldn't you put something of that nature in your journals? What are the reasons?
Well, one, I didn't want to solidify it. I mean, this sounds like denial, but I didn't want to solidify it more in reality by putting it on paper and making it more concrete. And another reason is that, and that goes to law of attraction, another reason is that if Travis were to read it, in the past he made me tear out some negative things I'd written about him. So I didn't want to put more things on paper that were negative about him. I just wanted to focus on his good qualities, not his shortcomings.
Okay. Now I want to ask you about some specific entries you were questioned about, referring you to Exhibit 455. You were shown this entry. Do you recall that?
Yes.
Not quoting the whole thing, but you say you love Travis Alexander so completely, correct?
Yes.
And you felt that at the time?
Yes.
Okay. As it relates to your journal that day, was that your entire entry?
No.
I'm going to show you what's just been marked as exhibit number 510, if I may approach on.
Yes.
And Ms. Arias, if you could just take a look at this and advise us if this constitutes your entire entry of 82607.
Yes.
Move to admit exhibit 510.
Objection, these are 3 entries instead of the 1 that was presented to her by the state dated Sunday, August 26, 2007, so I would object. Plus, it also has writings apparently put there by defense counsel.
Counsel, please approach.
turning your attention back to Exhibit 510, there are separate, it appears you write down the date on a couple of different occasions in this exhibit. Could you take a look at that for us when you put the date in three different areas?
Yes.
And in terms of that date, all those are dated August 27th of 2007. Is that correct?
26th.
26, excuse me. Was that then a continuation of the thoughts and ideas you were having on that day?
Objection made.
Overruled, Jimmy answer.
Yes, it was all the same day.
I move to admit Exhibit 510, Judge.
Judge, may I, board dire the witness, objection on the grounds of foundation?
You may.
Ma'am, with regard to that particular exhibit, there are 3 separate entries, aren't there?
Yes.
And they're both on August 26th of '07, right?
All 3 of them, yes.
And in fact, on the first page, there's some highlight, right?
Yes.
You didn't highlight it, did you?
No.
You didn't put that on there, right?
No.
And in fact, on the second page, there's some words, right?
Yes.
You didn't write those words on there, did you?
No.
And then on the other entry, which is involving August 26th of '07, it also has some more highlights on it, right?
Yes.
You didn't put those on there, right?
No.
And in fact, there's some words on there. You didn't put those on there either, did you?
No.
And the same thing with regard to the last page of this particular exhibit. It has some writing on it, doesn't it?
Yes.
Highlights there, doesn't it?
Yes.
You didn't put that on there, did you?
No.
Additionally, it includes August 28th of '07, Tuesday, doesn't it?
Yes.
That has nothing to do with August 26th of '07, right?
No.
And in fact, with regard to Sunday, August 26th of '07, you do write what we previously talked about involving your undying love for Mr. Alexander, correct?
Objection, Your Honor. It's beyond the scope of the board or the witness, but I would object to anyway.
Overruled, you may continue.
And then in another part of this particular entry, you talk about a wholly different person, don't you?
Person?
Yes.
I believe I did mention that.
Yes, you do, don't you? It's not about Travis Alexander, the rest of it, is it?
The rest of it?
Look, the rest of this entry has nothing to do with Travis Alexander, does it?
It doesn't have to be, Your Honor. It's not related to foundation.
Continue.
Does it?
The highlight portion does.
I'm not asking about the highlighted portion. I'm asking about the one on the right that's not highlighted. That has nothing to do with Mr. Alexander, does it?
No, that's law of attraction stuff.
Right. It doesn't have to do with Mr. Alexander and what happened with regard to August 26th of '07, does it?
Indirectly it does because it's law of attraction, but it doesn't mention.
Doesn't it talk about your mental outlook and what you need to do at self-improvement, ma'am?
Yes.
And then the same thing with regard to the second page of the first August 26th of '07 entry, right? Isn't that what it talks about?
Objection, Your Honor. I asked to approach.
You may.
Continue.
Mr. Arias, could you do me a favor and read through the entirety of the exhibit 510? And just let us know when you've completed reading that.
Okay.
Based on your review of that document dated August 26, 2007, without telling us exactly what was written in there, what issues are you dealing with in your life on August 27, 2007?
26th, right?
Huh?
26th.
26, I'm sorry.
I am writing about Travis. The range of emotions that I feel when I'm with him.
Okay. And was that subject matter, the range of emotions that you feel with him, was that something that was on your mind all throughout that day?
Predominantly, yes.
Okay. And the journal entries that you made throughout that day predominantly deal with those issues. Is that accurate?
Objection, reading.
Let me answer.
Yes, I would say so. It starts with him and ends with him.
Okay. I want to draw your attention now to the highlighted portions of those journal entries. Can you look at those and tell us what the significance is of the highlighted portion?
In this first highlighted portion, I'm writing about the range from positive to negative that I feel when I'm with him.
And the next highlighted portion?
Writing about suicide.
Is that directly related to the positive and negative things you're feeling related to Mr. Alexander?
I would say it was a trigger, but not the cause.
Okay. And the next highlighted portion?
I write about being at Rachel's house and about not wanting Travis to know because he would be upset, and about not tolerating any longer him saying negative things about her or any of my friends, and vice versa, about anyone saying, not tolerating anything when anyone saying anything negative about Travis either.
And was that the last highlighted portion there on the document?
Yes.
And all those dealt with Mr. Alexander and the issues you were dealing with in your own mind on that day. Is that accurate?
Yes, either directly or indirectly.
Judge, I'm once again going to move to admit Exhibit 510.
Judge, lack of foundation relevance. Additionally, there's some writings that are not attributed to the defendant that somebody put in there, but we don't know who.
More foundation regarding the words that are written in orange.
Let me draw your attention again, Ms. Arias, to Exhibits 510 as well as 242-001. You see the words written on the Exhibit 510 in orange?
Yes.
Looking at Exhibit 242-001, what do those words, and you can flip to the other pages of either exhibit, what do those words signify?
They signify the fact that this page has been torn out, part of it.
And those pages are actually torn out in your journal, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Judge, I'm going to move to admit Exhibit 510.
And lack of foundation as to who tore it out.
Thing.
You just had testimony about that, Judge.
Tied up to that particular entry.
As it relates to August 26, 2007, these pages that were torn out. And you previously testified that you tore out those pages?
Yes, I did.
Those half pages, excuse me. Now I would move to admit Exhibit 510.
Subject to the same foundation, I don't have anything else to add to it.
All right. Move to admit exhibit 510.
Okay, Jodi. Now, by comparison, this is Exhibit 455. And we talked about that not being your entire entry at that occasion or on that day, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. The rest of your entry that day is approximately, using the journal pages as a guide, almost 6 pages. Is that correct?
Objection leading to mischaracterizes that entry. Those are 3 entries. Oh, overruled.
Yes.
Okay. What I'd like you to do, we can see the part here before that's contained in Exhibit 455. We can see that written above the highlighted portion. Maybe if you could begin reading 455 and moving into the highlighted portion that's contained in Exhibit 510. Could you just read that for us?
Yes, start from the beginning.
Yes.
Well, it's a good thing that nobody else reads this because I write right now that I love Travis Victor Alexander so completely that I don't know any other way to be. I wish I did because at times my heart is sick and saddened over all that has come to pass. I don't understand it, and at times I still have a hard time believing it. He makes me sick, and he makes me happy. He makes me sad and miserable, and he makes me feel uplifted and beautiful. All in all, I shouldn't be wording it as if he makes me feel those things.
Move it up for you. Sorry.
It all originates from within. All of my darkness is a result of my own creation. It is the fruit of my thoughts, planted continually and with too much repetition. Do you want me to keep reading?
Well, no, let's stop there. When you say all of your darkness is a result of my own creation, what are you telling us there about the relationship with Travis? What you say above?
Objection reading, she says, all of my darkness is a result. Doesn't say anything about Mr. Alexander.
Okay. When you talk, previous sentence, you're talking about Mr. Alexander. You say, all in all, I shouldn't be wording it. He makes me feel those things. Right? You see that?
Right.
Okay. You say it all originates from within. Meaning, well, what does that mean? It all originates from within.
To me, that just means that I'm responsible for how I feel, and Travis is not. Although I feel certain ways around him, I'm trying to take responsibility for my own feelings, not that he is making me feel that way, but that the darkness that I feel is because of myself, not because of him.
Drawing your attention to second entry on August 26, 2007. Could you read that for us?
I just wish I could die. I wish that suicide was a way out, but it is no escape. I wouldn't feel any more pain, though, if I could just stop existing and have my consciousness dissolved into nothingness and my energy recycled into something else useful, for I am of little use to the world right now through no fault but my own.
Judge Price. Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, tomorrow morning, 10:15. Say 10:30 tomorrow morning. 10:30. Please remember the admonition. You are excused. Have a nice evening. Record will show the jury has left the courtroom. Ms. Arias, you may step down. Counsel, anything else for today? Thank you.